Chapter 1: Guevara's Early Life in Argentina. Che Guevara was born on May 14, 1928. Although his birth certificate indicates he was born a month later, on June 14, 1928, in the Argentine city of Rosario, which is located in northern Argentina on the famous Paraná River. His parents named him Ernesto, his father's tireless name, and as is the custom throughout most of Latin America, his full name consisted of both his father's family name and his mother's family name. Thus, as a boy and young man, he was known as Ernesto Guevara de la Serna, Guevara being his father's family name and de la Serna being his mother's family name, since he did not assume the tireless name of Che until much later in his life. In this chapter and the following 2 chapters, he will be referred to as Ernesto Guevara. His parents were of upper-class origin. His father, Ernesto Guevara Lynch, was an entrepreneur and a builder-architect who studied architecture, but never received his degree. During the more entrepreneurial phase of his career, he tried his hand at ranching, yacht building, and the cultivation of mate, the herbal tea that is the national drink in Argentina. However, he ended up as a builder-architect. His ancestry was both Spanish Guevara and Irish Lynch, and one of his great-grandfathers was one of the wealthiest men in South America, Che Guevara, Anderson, 1997. 4. But over the years, the Guevara family lost most of their wealth. Ernesto's, Che's, great-grandfather Juan Antonio Guevara left Argentina for the gold rush in California, where he married a beautiful Mexican woman named Concepcion Castro. Their son, Roberto Guevara Castro, was born in California but returned with his parents to Argentina, where he married Ana Isabel Lynch, who was also born in California. She was the daughter of an Argentine family of Irish ancestry that, like the Guevaras, went to California during the gold rush, but returned later to Argentina. Their son, Ernesto Guevara Lynch, was Ernesto's Che's father. During Ernesto's Che's childhood, he loved listening to his grandmother Ana Isabel's tales of frontier life in California. His mother, Celia de la Serna y Losa, came from a wealthy landowning family of Spanish ancestry. Her parents died when she was quite young, and as a result, she received a sizable inheritance at the age of 21, which was the same year Ernesto was born. She graduated from an exclusive Catholic girls' school in Buenos Aires. She was an intelligent, quite literate, unconventional, and generous person who remained devoted to Ernesto, her first-born, until her death just a few years before his own. Soon after Ernesto's birth, his parents moved to San Isidro, Argentina, where Ernesto's father was a partner in a yacht-building business. It was while they were living in this city, along the banks of the La Plata River, that his parents discovered the young Ernesto had asthma, which he suffered from the rest of his life. His mother was an avid swimmer, and used to take him with her to the yacht club in San Isidro when she went swimming. On one particularly chilly day, by the time she was ready to leave the club, she discovered he was very ill. She and her husband took him immediately to a local doctor, who informed them that their son had a severe asthmatic condition. For the next 2 years, Che's parents tried every possible cure, but in the end they were advised that they would have to move to a much drier climate if they wanted their son's health to improve. As a result, they moved to the little town of Alta Gracia on the gentle western slopes of the Sierra Chica in the central Argentine province of Córdoba. Ernesto grew up in Alta Gracia and later in the provincial capital city of Córdoba, along with his 2 brothers and 2 sisters, who were Guevara's early life in Argentina, 3 born there. The dry climate of the region greatly benefited his health, although he continued to suffer periodic asthma attacks, which at times forced him to stay in bed for days. Nevertheless, as he grew older, Ernesto spent as much time outdoors as possible. His childhood friends recall that he was always organizing hikes to the hills and playing games requiring physical skill and endurance, CheGuevara, and Picken 2007. He learned to swim at an early age, and this sport became one of his passions. His parents, especially his mother, encouraged him to swim, since they believed this sport would improve his health and particularly his breathing problems. As he grew older, he also became an avid golfer and loved to ride horses. His friends remember him as a decisive and bold youth who was very sure of himself, CheGuevara, and Piquen 2007. He had several nicknames during his childhood. His family members often called him Teat, while his friends called him Ernestito, Fuser, and Chancho. His childhood and school friends remember him for his enthusiasm, mischievous and courageous nature, and adventurousness. Evidently, he was a real daredevil, willing to do almost anything, perhaps to prove to himself that in spite of his chronic illness, he was just as good or better at doing things as his friends. Enrique Martin, one of his childhood friends, remembers him as a real friend when somebody needed him, and as a charismatic person who never got angry more than 2 minutes. According to Martin, we all respected and admired him for his kindness, Caligiuri and Piquen 2007-52. The family rented various houses in Alta Gracia, but the house where they spent the most time was Villa Nidia, which is today the Museo Casa del CheGuevara, Museum of Che Guevara's house. The family lived in Villa Nidia from 1935 to 1937, and again from 1939 to 1943. Caligiuri and Piquen 2007-41. It is the house that was most thought of by the Guevara family as their home in Alta Gracia. Ernesto's family life was relatively happy, although his parents separated when he was a young adult. His father gave him considerable freedom and moral support. His mother gave him a great deal of love and attention. They had a special bond between them. Ernesto always confided in her, even years later when he became an important leader in the Cuban Revolution. Because of his asthma, he was unable to attend school during the 5 years of his primary education, Caligiuri, and for CheGuevara Piquen 2007-72. During this period, his mother tutored him at home, and Ernesto spent hours reading alone or playing chess with his father. Later on, when he was enrolled in school, his mother taught him to speak and read French, in which he was fluent. By this time, the frequency of his asthmatic attacks had decreased considerably, and his attendance in secondary school was quite regular. Despite his asthma, as he grew older, Ernesto became involved in a wide variety of outdoor activities and sports. He swam, played soccer and golf, rode horses, took up target shooting, and loved biking and hiking. Anderson 1997. 18. Although he sometimes had to be carried home by his friends because of an asthma attack, he was determined to do everything his friends could do and refused to let his asthma limit him. The administrator of his primary school, Elba Rossi de Ovido, remembered him as a mischievous boy who exhibited leadership qualities on the playground. Anderson 1997. 19. She said, many children followed him during recess. He was a leader, but not an arrogant person. Sometimes he climbed up trees in the schoolyard. She also said he was an intelligent and independent person who had the qualities necessary to lead a group, and he never sat at the same desk in the classroom. He needed all of them. Caligiuri and Piquen 2007-72. Ernesto's parents wanted their children to be freethinkers. At home, the parents never spoke of religion except to occasionally criticize the conservative hierarchy of the Catholic Church, and the children were given considerable freedom to think and talk about all kinds of subjects, as well as indiscriminately associate with people from all classes. Caligiuri and Piquen 2007. They were given no religious instruction, and his parents asked that their children be excused from religion classes in school. Although he was baptized as a Roman Catholic when he was an infant to please his grandparents, Ernesto was never confirmed as a member of the church. His parents, especially his father, were critical of the hypocritical role played by the conservative Catholic clergy in Latin American society. They felt strongly that their children should not be overprotected, and that they should learn about life's secrets and dangers at an early age. Their home life was somewhat bohemian, and they followed few social conventions. Anderson 1997. 20. Ernesto's mother, Celia, challenged the prevailing gender norms for women in Alta Gracia and was Guevara's early life in Argentina. 5. A liberated woman for her time. She was the first woman in town to drive a car, wear trousers, and smoke cigarettes in public. She was able to get away with breaking many of the social norms in the socially conservative community because of her social standing and generosity. She regularly transported her children and their friends to school in the family car and started a daily free milk program in the school for the poorer children, which she paid for herself. Ernesto's father considered Celia to be imprudent from birth and attracted to danger, and chided her for passing these character traits on to her son, Anderson, 21. Ernesto's father, in turn, was known to have an Irish temper, and it appears he passed this trait on to Ernesto, who as a child could become uncontrollable with rage if he felt he was treated unjustly. In temperament, however, Ernesto was more like his mother, who was his confidant, and at times his co-conspirator in Crete, sizing what they considered to be the hypocritical and outmoded social norms of their provincial community. Ernesto enjoyed playing soccer, or football as it is called in Latin America, and most of the world, and rugby. In the former sport, he usually played the position of goalkeeper, always with an inhaler for his author at entrance to CheGuevara House Museum in Alta Gracia, Argentina. Richard L. Harris, 6 Guevara asthma in his pocket. However, it was at rugby that he really excelled. Hugo Gambini, in his biography of Che, claims that the position he played as a youth in this game helped to define his personality. Gambini, 1968. 18. It seems he played the position of forward, which is generally the key position in rugby since the majority of advances depend on it. Ernesto played this position fearlessly, as though both his personality and his physical attributes had been made to order for it. Perhaps, as Gambini suggests, this game was instrumental in shaping Ernesto's personality as a daring leader. All those who knew Ernesto Guevara as a youth were impressed by his intelligence and the ease with which he learned new things. However, he was not an exceptional student, and he was not interested in getting high grades in school, since his interests lay outside of school. He was preoccupied with hiking, football, rugby, and chess. In the case of chess, he was an excellent player, and it became his main hobby. Ernesto also was an avid reader. From his father, he developed a love for books on adventure and history, especially the works of Jules Verne, Tabo 1996-24. And from his mother, he gained a love for Ficedion literature, philosophy, and poetry. He had read nearly every book in his parents' relatively large home library by the time he was in his early adolescence. Ernesto grew up in a highly politicized environment. Both his mother and father identify with the leftist Republican cause during the Spanish Civil War. And after the war, they became close friends with two Spanish Republican families who had been forced to flee Spain and seek exile in Argentina after the fall of the Republic, when the dictatorship of General Francisco Franco was established. The Guevara family was also fiercely anti-Nazi. His father belonged to an anti-Nazi and pro-Allies organization called Acción Argentina, and Ernesto joined the youth wing of this organization when he was 11. Anderson, 1997. 23. His mother formed a committee to send clothes and food to Charles de Gaulle's Free French forces during World War II. She was leftist in her political orientation and far more progressive-minded in her political views than his father, who was more of a libertarian conservative. However, both of Che's parents strongly opposed the spread of fascism in Europe and Argentina, and opposed the popular military strongman Juan Perón as he rose to political power in Argentina. During the Guevara's early life in Argentina, 7 presidency of Perón, Ernesto's mother was an outspoken critic of this famous Argentine political leader and the mass political movement called Peronism that he created in Argentina. Because of his parents' active support for the Republican cause in Spain and the Allied countries fighting against fascism in Europe during World War II, and their opposition to Peronism in Argentina after the war, Ernesto was caught up in his parents' political activities at a crucial time in the early formation of his political consciousness. Anderson, 23-25. His family's involvement in anti-fascist and anti-Peronist politics helped shape his view of the world, as well as his political ideals and views. According to those who knew him as a youth, many of the character traits for which he became famous as an adult were already present when he was a boy. Physical fearlessness, inclination to lead others, stubbornness, competitive spirit, and self-discipline. Anderson, 1997-21. However, at this stage in his life, his interest in politics was secondary to his other interests. In the summer of 1943, Ernesto and his family moved from Alta Gracia to the nearby city of Córdoba, to which he was already commuting daily by bus to attend a secondary school more liberal than the one in Alta Gracia. Largely because of his mother's wishes, their home in Cordoba had the same casual open-door policy as their home in Alta Gracia. All the friends and acquaintances of the Guevara children were always welcome. There was no regular schedule for meals, and they ate when they were hungry, and there was nearly always a wide assortment of interesting guests. Anderson, 27. Although the Guevaras welcomed everyone into their home, Ernesto and his mother would tease Merci Leslie any visitor who showed any pretentiousness, snobbery, or pompous behavior. Among the new friends Ernesto made in Cordoba were two brothers, Tomás and Alberto Granado, Tabo, 25. Tomás was Ernesto's schoolmate, and Alberto was Tomás's older brother. Alberto was a Phi R.S.D. year student in biochemistry and pharmacology at the University of Cordoba when they Phi R.S.D. met. He was also the coach of a local rugby team, even though Ernesto was relatively inexperienced, and his father was afraid he would suffer a heart attack from playing such a strenuous sport. Ernesto convinced Alberto to let him join the team. He soon ate. CheGuevara earned a reputation for being a fearless rugby player despite his frequent asthma attacks. Alberto was impressed by his fearlessness and his determination to excel at the sport. He was also pleasantly surprised to discover Ernesto was an avid reader like himself. In fact, Alberto and Tomás found it difficult to believe that the young teenager Ernesto had already read so many books. Moreover, his reading list included the works of preeminent authors such as Sigmund Freud, Charles-Pierre Baudelaire, Émile Zola, Jack London, Pablo Neruda, Anatole France, William Faulkner, John Steinbeck, and Karl Marx. He especially liked the poetry of Chile's famous poet Pablo Neruda, and his personal hero was Mahatma Gandhi, whom he deeply admired. Tabo, 26. Hilda Gadia, his Phi R.S.D. wife, remembers that Ernesto told her he read everything in his father's library when he was a teenager. Ernesto told me how when he was still in high school, he decided to start reading seriously and began by swallowing his father's library, choosing volumes at random. The books were not classify ed, and next to an adventure book, he would find a Greek tragedy and then a book on Marxism. Gadia 2008, 40. His interests were eclectic, but he took a special interest in poetry and could recite many of his favorite poems from memory. Although he read books on political topics and enjoyed discussing politics with his family and friends, most of his schoolmates remember him as being for the most part politically disinterested during his secondary school years. Anderson, 33. As for sex, he was definitely interested. In the mid-1940s in Argentina, good girls were expected to remain a virgin until they married, and boys from the upper classes were expected by their families and the social norms of their class to respect the virginity of the girls they dated, especially if they were from their same social circles. For their Phi R.S.D. sexual experiences, therefore, boys from Ernesto's class went to brothels or had sexual relations with girls from the lower classes, often the young maids who worked in their homes or the homes of their friends. In Ernesto's case, his Phi R.S.D. sexual experience appears to have occurred with a young maid when he was 15. Guevara's early life in Argentina. 9. A friend from Alta Gracia, Carlos Calica Ferrer, arranged a sexual liaison for him with a Ferrer family maid, a young woman called La Negra Cabrera. Unknown to Ernesto at the time, Calica and a few of his friends spied on him while he had sex with the young woman. The following is a brief account of Ernesto's sexual initiation with La Negra. They observed that, while he conducted himself admirably on top of the pliant maid, he periodically interrupted his lovemaking to suck on his asthma inhaler. The spectacle soon had them in stitches and remained a source of amusement for years afterward. Anderson, 35. According to his friends, Ernesto was not perturbed by their jokes about his Phi R.S.D. experience in lovemaking, and continued for some time thereafter to have sexual relations with La Negra. By the time he graduated from secondary school, Ernesto had developed into an extremely attractive young man, slim and wide-shouldered, with dark brown hair, intense brown eyes, clear white skin, and a self-contained, easy confidence that made him alluring to girls. Anderson, 36. By the time he was 17, he had developed a devil-may-care and eccentric attitude that was characterized by his contempt for formality and social decorum, and a penchant for shocking his teachers and classmates with his unconventional comments and behavior. He also bragged about how infrequently he took a bath or changed his clothes, and as a result, he earned the nickname among his friends of El Chancho, the pig, for his unkempt appearance and reluctance to bathe. What most of his friends did not realize was that he often had asthma attacks when he took a bath or shower, especially if the water was cold. Tabo, 27. In general, his grades in secondary school reflected his interests. He did best in the subjects that most interested him: literature, history, and philosophy. His grades were weak in mathematics and natural history because they didn't interest him, and they were poor in English and music. Tabo 1996, 28. He had no ear for music, and he was a poor dancer because he couldn't follow the music. In 1945, he took a serious CheGuevara interest in philosophy and compiled a 165-page notebook that he called his philosophical dictionary. The rest of 7 such notebooks that he produced over the next 10 years. It contained in alphabetical order his notes on the main ideas and biographies of the important thinkers he had read and quotations of their definitions of key concepts such as love, immortality, sexual morality, justice, faith, God, death, reason, neurosis, and paranoia. Tabo, 28. It also contained his commentaries on these notes, which he often wrote in the margins, thanks largely to his mother Celia's egalitarian informality. His home was a fascinating human zoo that was frequented by a diverse range of colorful people of all social classes, occupations, levels of education, and ages, who often ate there and sometimes stayed a week or a month at a time. Anderson, 39. His mother presided over this melange of adults, teenagers, and children, while Ernesto's father came and went on his old motorbike named La Pedora, the farter. Ernesto CheGuevara, here as a child in Argentina, c. 1940. Photo by Apic/Getty Images. Guevara's early life in Argentina, 11, found it difficult to study or read in such a chaotic and distracting environment. So he got into the habit of closing himself in the bathroom where he would read for hours. During this period, his parents became estranged, but continued to live under the same roof. In 1946, Ernesto graduated from secondary school. He and his friend Tomás Granado, Alberto's younger brother, made plans to study engineering the following year at the University of Buenos Aires. And in the meantime, they obtained jobs working for the Provincial Public Highways Department after taking a special course for field analysts. Ernesto was hired as a materials analyst and sent to the north to inspect the materials being used on the roads around Villa Maria, where he was given free lodging and the use of a vehicle. Anderson, 40. While he was there, he was confronted with the news of 2 tragedies. He learned his hero from boyhood, Mahatma Gandhi, the famous leader of India's national independence movement against British colonial rule, had been assassinated, and his beloved grandmother Ana Isabel Guevara was terminally ill. Tabo 1996, 29. Before he left Villa Maria, he wrote a prophetic poem about his own death and his personal struggle to overcome his frequent asthma attacks. The following is an extract from this free verse poem. The bullets, what can the bullets do to me if my destiny is to die by drowning? But I am going to overcome destiny. Destiny can be overcome by willpower. Die, yes, but riddled with bullets. Destroyed by bayonets, if not no. Drowned, no. A memory more lasting than my name is to fi GHT, to die fi GHting. Quoted in Anderson, 44. As this extract from a poem he wrote in January 1947 reveals, Ernesto had a premonition that he would die fi GHting, riddled with bullets, rather than drowning from his asthma. This poem was written 20 years before he died, riddled with bullets, in 1967. During his absence from Cordoba, his family moved to Buenos Aires. His father's business was doing poorly, and the family was forced to sell their house in Cordoba and move into the apartment his grandmother 12 CheGuevara Ana Isabel Guevara owned and lived in. By May 1947, his grandmother was on her deathbed, and Ernesto gave up his job in Villa Maria to be at her bedside. According to his father, Ernesto was desperate at seeing that his grandmother didn't eat, so he tried with incredible patience to get her to eat food entertaining her, and without leaving her side. And he remained there until she left this world. Quoted in Anderson, 41, he was greatly affected by the death of his grandmother, with whom he had a special emotional attachment. His sister Celia had never seen her older brother so upset and grief-stricken. Many years later, she observed that it must have been one of the greatest sadnesses of his life. Anderson, 41. Apparently, the painful death of his beloved grandmother and his personal interest in finding a cure for asthma led him to change his mind about pursuing a degree in engineering and to study medicine instead. Anderson, 42. Tabo, 29. Within a month of arriving in Buenos Aires, he enrolled in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Buenos Aires. His family believed he made this decision to change careers because of the shock of his grandmother's painful death and his desire to pursue a career that would alleviate human suffering. But his choice of specialties and research interests in medicine suggested he was also motivated by a desire to find a cure for asthma. Years later, he said he chose a career in medicine because I dreamed of becoming a famous investigator, of working indefatigably to find something that could be definitively placed at the disposition of humanity. Quoted in Anderson, 42. In addition to his studies at the university, he held a number of part-time jobs. The one he held the longest was in the clinic of Dr. Salvador Pisani, where he also received treatment for his asthma. Anderson, 43. Dr. Pisani gave him the opportunity to work as a research assistant in the laboratory of his clinic, Specifi Cali, on the pioneering use of vaccinations and other innovative types of treatment for the allergies associated with asthma. Ernesto became so enthralled in this research that he decided to specialize in the treatment of allergies for his medical Guevara's early life in Argentina 13 career. He became a exterior of Dr. Pisani's clinic and his home, where the doctor's mother and sister prepared a special anti-asthma diet for Ernesto and took care of him when he suffered severe asthma attacks. What little spare time he devoted to rugby, chess, and travel. He registered for military service as required when he was 18, but he was given a medical deferment from military service because of his asthma. As for his political orientation at this stage of his life, he was a progressive liberal who avoided affiliation with any political organization. Anderson, 50. His political views were nationalist, anti-imperialist, and anti-American, but he was quite critical of the Argentine Communist Party and its youth organization at the university for their sectarianism, intolerance of other political organizations and ideologies. While he was not a Marxist, he did already have a special interest in Marx's writings and in socialist thought. At this stage of his life, he was an engaging and intelligent nonconformist, an oddball who most of his friends and acquaintances found difficult to categorize. Since he was not quite 18 when the national election was held that elected Juan Perón to the presidency of Argentina in 1946, he was not able to vote in this historic election. But like most other students of his generation, he did not support Perón. His views regarding Perón have been characterized as a-Peronism. Castaneda, 3035, meaning he did not care much one way or the other about Perón and his policies. However, he reportedly told the maids who worked for his family that they should vote for Perón, since his policies would help their class. It is not clear what he thought of Argentina's popular female political figure during this period. The beautiful blonde radio actress Evita, who was Perón's controversial mistress, until he married her a few months before his election to the presidency in 1946. During the years, Ernesto was a university student. Evita Duarte Perón became the darling of Argentina's popular classes because of her charismatic populist speeches and her highly publicized personal crusade for labor and women's rights. FF 1997. While her husband was president, she ran the Argentine federal government's Ministries of Labor and Health, founded and led the Eva Perón Foundation, which provided charitable services to the poor, especially to the elderly, women, and children, and created and served as the president of the 14 CheGuevara nations RSD mass women's organization, called the Peronist Women's Party. After her death from cancer in 1952, Evita, like Che Guevara later, became a powerful icon in the political culture of Argentina and Latin America. However, there is no evidence there was ever any personal or political connection between these two historic figures. After living in his deceased mother's apartment for a year, Ernesto's father sold his mate plantation and gave the money to Celia to buy a modest home in Buenos Aires at the edge of the desirable Palermo district, Anderson. 44-45. However, to make ends meet, the older children had to find jobs. Despite the now obvious separation between his parents, his father slept on the sofa in the living room of the new house. Ernesto maintained his close and open relationship with both parents, his father fondly describing their relationship during this period as follows. We joked with one another as if we were the same age. He teased me continuously. As soon as we found ourselves at the table in our house, he would goad me with arguments of a political character. Ernesto, who at that time was 20 years old, surpassed me in this area, and we argued constantly. Those who overheard us might have thought we were fighting. Not at all. Deep down, there existed a true camaraderie between us. Quoted in Anderson, 45. Although his relationship was one of camaraderie with his father, with his mother it was more attentive and considerate, especially after she was diagnosed with breast cancer and had a mastectomy in 1946. Anderson, 56-57. She presided over the household in Buenos Aires in much the same way she did in Cordoba and Alta Gracia. She showed a complete disregard for social decorum and housekeeping, but generously offered informal hospitality to all manner of guests. There was very little furniture and few decorations in the house. Books were everywhere, and the walls in the kitchen gave electrical shocks because of a chronic short circuit in the electrical wiring. Ernesto often went to his Aunt Beatrice's and deceased grandmother's apartment to study, and his father went there often to sleep. Guevara's early life in Argentina, 15 cause of the noise and people coming and going in the family's house. Ernesto had a special relationship with his spinster aunt, who loved to mother him. She would prepare meals for him, and according to his father, his Aunt Beatrice didn't sleep while Ernesto studied. She always had his mate ready to prepare for him and accompanied him when he took a break, and she did this all with the greatest of affection. Quoted in Anderson, 46. She was quite conservative and proper, so Ernesto loved to scandalize her with his ideas and stories, but always in an affectionate and respectful manner. According to a cousin who accompanied him frequently to his aunt's apartment, Ernesto secretly seduced her maid without their aunt knowing anything about it. Anderson, 47. From this period of his life, there is a photograph of Ernesto with his classmates in one of the classrooms of the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Buenos Aires. A careful examination of this photograph provides some clues to Ernesto's character, state of mind, and his relationships at the time. In the photograph, 28 white-coated students stand in 3 rows on different levels behind a naked cadaver with an open chest cavity on a metal table in the foreground. A few of the students are smiling at the camera, and the rest have assumed a serious professional look. But in the 3rd row is one student who is looking open-eyed at the camera with a broad, joking smile. It is Ernesto. All the men are wearing ties, except for Ernesto, who is wearing a white shirt, probably the one white nylon shirt he owned and which he called La Seminara, the weekly one because he wore it all the time and washed it once a week. There are only 3 women in the group photograph, one of whom is Berta Tita Infant, with whom Ernesto had a deep but platonic relationship. She is looking at the camera with an intense gaze. Tita and Ernesto met in an anatomy course and became very close friends and confidants. It appears she wanted more from the relationship than he did, or at least more than he was willing to give at the time. What follows is her description of Ernesto. By his accent, he was a provincial. By his appearance, he was a beautiful and uninhibited young man. A mixture of shyness and arrogance. Maybe the audacity hid his profound intelligence, 16 CheGuevara, and insatiable desire to understand things, and there, at the bottom of his heart, an infinite capacity to love. Quoted in Tabo, 32, they met often, studied together, and discussed their personal problems. Their friendship lasted beyond medical school, and he corresponded almost as frequently with her after he left Argentina as he did with his mother and Aunt Beatrice. As for Ernesto's own reflection on this period of his life, years later, he said the following: "When I began to study medicine, the majority of the concepts that I have as a revolutionary were absent from the storehouse of my ideas. I wanted to succeed, like everyone. I dreamed of being a famous researcher, dreamed of working untiringly to succeed at doing something that could be definitively placed at the disposal of humanity. But in that moment, it was a personal achievement." Ernesto Che Guevara, c. 1950, when he was a medical student. Photo by Getty Images. Guevara's early life in Argentina 17 that I wanted. "I was, as we all are, a child of my environment." Quoted in Tabo, 32. Thus, Che, the revolutionary, looking back on his student years, saw himself as a product of his own environment, someone who was primarily concerned with his own individual success, and not yet someone who was prepared unselfishly to place himself at the service of humanity.
Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe,